Our officers observed Mr. Pelosi and the suspect both holding a hammer.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
Punch some people in the face! What is going on with this Paul Pelosi hammer attack? We'll dive deep into everything that we know. A lot of stuff happened around the world that we may or may not get to. Democrats choose violence consistently. I mean, liberals, not Democrats. Well, I don't know. Whatever you want to call them. Joe Biden also has to show his ID to vote, and a lot more coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Caller Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today it is October 31st. Happy Halloween. I, as you can see, am dressed up as, I don't know, I didn't come up with a joke here. I spent so much time digging into this Paul Pelosi thing that I don't know. I was not really prepared for this little intro thing to last as long as it did in the beginning. But, you know, such is Monday mornings. Which I want to get to this first, and I would imagine a lot of people are paying attention to what's going on with the speaker's husband. If you haven't heard, if for some reason you've been living under a rock for the last couple of days, Paul Pelosi, the husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, got attacked with a hammer inside his house on, was that Thursday night, Friday morning, at like 2:30 in the morning. Now, there is a lot going on here, a lot of different directions, a lot of different conspiracy ideas, a lot of questions to be remained answered. I'm going to give it to you right off the top of the bat. I don't know what's going on. I have no idea. We'll let the facts sort itself out. I'm not going to sit here and say it was definitely this, it was definitely this. I can tell you there's a couple of things that it definitely wasn't. But we'll get to that later on. So if you're looking for like we found insider information that Paul Pelosi picked up a dude from a gay bar and they got in a fight at 2:30 in the morning and he had to call the cops. I don't know. I'm not saying that's not what this is. This is outlining everything that we know from this, from various sources, and posing some questions of, this part of this is really weird. Right? This is not going off the deep end here talking about conspiracy theories and all that sort of stuff. But everything that I know, I don't know. This whole thing got really, really interesting. I want to start with the clip of the San Francisco police chief talking to the press on Friday. A couple things that he said seemed to trip up some of the conversation around this. Again, this is not the place for outlandish conspiracy theories, but at the same time, there are some inconsistencies that I don't quite understand as of yet. So I want to start with this. This is the clip of the San Francisco police chief, I think, or the guy who gave the press conference on Friday, talking about what happened with his officers. Check this out, and we'll discuss on the other side. Watch this.
At approximately 2:27 this morning, San Francisco police officers were dispatched to the residence of Speaker Nancy Pelosi regarding an A-priority well-being check. When the officers arrived on scene, they encountered an adult male and Mr. Pelosi's husband, Paul. Our officers observed Mr. Pelosi and the suspect both holding a hammer. The suspect pulled the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi and violently assaulted him with it. Our officers immediately tackled the suspect, disarmed him, took him into custody, requested emergency backup, and rendered medical aid. The suspect has been identified as 42-year-old David DePepe.
Okay, so first things first, I can't believe I forgot to say this on the onset. No political violence. What you think, whatever it is that you believe, do not attack people who disagree with you politically. I don't care if you think Nancy Pelosi is driving the country into the ground. I think we'd probably agree on a lot of things, especially from a policy standpoint. But don't attack her or her husband on the right, on the left, and just just don't do it. Political violence is bad all across the board. Nobody's advocating for this, and we'll get to some of the hypocrisy on the left side of the aisle about what they've said in the past. There's this great page called Defiant L's, and maybe we'll read a couple tweets of those, but they posted a lot of old tweets of people saying, I'm glad Rand Paul's neighbor tackled him. I hate that guy. And then now saying, I can't believe that anybody would go and attack Nancy Pelosi's husband. Very, very polar opposite opinions, especially down the line. What I'm saying here now, and being very clear, is consistency. We're trying to be consistent. Don't attack people for their political beliefs. That should be well understood. Okay, now that that disclaimer is out of the way, some of this stuff is kind of odd. Okay, so what the police officer just said there with the I think he's the captain, I'm not sure what his title is in the San Francisco PD, but what he said to the press was the officers showed up at Pelosi's house and they were both holding the hammer. Okay, so there's probably some struggle over the hammer. Then, when officers were in the house, the other guy, not Paul Pelosi, grabs the hammer and then hits him in front of the officers. Again, and I'm not saying that this 100% happened. I'm just saying this is what the police statement said. He just said that. In front of the officers, hits Paul Pelosi in the head. Now, I want to read from the San Francisco Chronicle. Now, I know there's probably a lot of people that have various opinions on different newspapers and their viability. But what I've found, especially in these types of instances, the local paper, regardless of their political slant, is probably better than the big national media. There's a bunch of papers out of D.C., and not to say that they can't do this job, but there's a lot of papers out of D.C. and New York that aren't localized. This is San Francisco Chronicle, whether you agree with them or not politically, is localized here. So I wanted to read what they had to say about it before kind of getting into some of the questions that a lot of people are asking and should probably be answered. Also, by the way, if you haven't already, I see a couple thousand of you watching this. I really, really appreciate you doing that. If you wouldn't mind clicking the little like button down here or the reaction button, maybe the whoa button or the angry button, depending on how you feel today. Also, the little share button over here would really, really appreciate you doing so. It really, really helps us keep the ball rolling. Again, there's about several thousand of you watching this bad boy, and I appreciate you doing so. But if you wouldn't mind helping us out just a little bit. So this is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Scott, who is the police chief, speaking at a news conference on Friday, said authorities received Pelosi's call at around 2:28 a.m. after DePepe forced entry into the back of the home. Okay, full stop there. As rich as the Pelosi's are, now remember, Paul Pelosi, I'm not going to talk about how he became a bajillionaire, but Paul Pelosi is a bajillionaire, and they live in the most exclusive neighborhood in San Francisco that costs literally $1 bajillion. That's a new number, new dollar figure. With the amount of money that they have, you would think that they would have better security and not allow people to break in. If that's the story, if the story is that this guy broke into the house, it's odd that somebody that rich has that poor of security that somebody can just break into the house. Remember, they live in a gated community, and in that gated community, they live in a very, very nice house. Especially in the past, some guy, I don't know if you remember this, pooped on Nancy Pelosi's driveway a couple years ago. She had her garage door defaced a couple years ago. Just from a rich standpoint, you would think that they would have better security. Okay. Now add the fact that Nancy Pelosi is third in line to the presidency. She's the Speaker of the House, the third, if you look at things this way, the third most important person in the United States government. If you don't know the line of succession, it goes President of the United States, Vice President, Speaker of the House, in terms of who can be the president if things go off the rails. Nancy Pelosi is the third most important person in the United States, and some guy is able to break into their house at 2:30 in the morning? Look, this is coming from, I guess, personal experience. I've been fortunate enough to be around some pretty important people in the last, I don't know, year or so. The people in the media that I interact with, you can't get a hold of them. There's security everywhere, and for good reason too. This political climate is nuts. When we go to events, there's tight security everywhere. This is like events in public. You would think the place that they live would have better security and probably a guy outside their house 24 hours a day. So that's a weird question that for some reason nobody is answering. My computer screen got logged out really quick, so I'm gonna log back in. Got to find where I was in this San Francisco Chronicle article. So the story in the media is as follows. According to the audio, the city police radio communication, a dispatcher working with Grives broadcast, I'm not sure what that is, at 2:28 stated that there is a man in the home and he's going to wait for his wife. Now, I have that audio of the dispatcher dispatching to the cops, and I want to play that for you because this is just getting interesting. Check this out. Watch this.
A priority 910, 2640 Broadway, across of Scott and Normandy. Hey, 14 hour copy. RP stated that there's a male in the home and that he's going to wait for his wife. RP stated that he doesn't know who the male is, but he advised that his name is David and that he is a friend. RP sounded somewhat confused. 12 over back and copy.
Units code 3 to 2640 Broadway per 14 hour.
Ever 12 over copy. 15 hour also code 3.
Everyone 12 advice insufficient units on scene 2640 Broadway. Special call medic 66, location 2640 Broadway.
Okay, just FYI, I'm probably not using the correct terminology. If you're in law enforcement and you're like, oh, the dispatcher is this and this is, yeah, sorry, I'm just not up to date on all of that sort of stuff. Now, okay, so here's what I warned at the beginning. This is not some, I'm going to try as best I can to make sense of the things that are out there. There's a lot of people, especially on Twitter, saying, Paul Pelosi called the cops saying this guy was a friend. If we were to be fair about what possibly could have happened, it could be, let's just go under the assumption that this guy actually broke in. If I was calling the cops on somebody that broke into my house, I would imagine that I would not want to alarm them and say anything too out of the ordinary. We don't know the details, so I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say they were definitely a friend and in cahoots together and they were trying to make a big media story. Again, there are some questions that we're going to get to that I feel like need to be answered that we'll get to in a second. But the fact that the dispatcher said, well, he's a friend, dispatcher, person on the cop, I don't know what the terminology is. But the fact that the person on the line or on the phone said, well, Paul Pelosi said it was a friend, I don't think necessarily means what a lot of people, especially on Twitter, are saying. It could be that Paul Pelosi was just trying to not aggravate the person that was broken into his house, which, by the way, how do you get into their house? She's the third person in line of the presidency. Why don't they have better security? There's a lot of people in the comment section talking about a love triangle and all that sort of stuff. Look, I said this at the very beginning. I have no idea what is actually happening, and we'll get to all of that as the information comes out. Why it's coming out so slow, I don't actually know. But I wanted to get to this Twitter thread. This is from Glenn Greenwald, and he said this. This is probably the most in line with what I'm trying to convey that I found. Glenn Greenwald tweeted this: "It is very possible that the instantly formed media narrative, Paul Pelosi's attacker was a MAGA fanatic who broke in to murder Nancy Pelosi, will be proven true." We're outlining that out at the very, very beginning. Again, I agree wholeheartedly with this statement. It's possible that the guy broke into the house, he's a crazy person, and tried to kill the Speaker of the House. And this is what the result was. Again, disclaimer, political violence is bad. Nobody should do it on any side. And that's it. Glenn Greenwald goes on to ask some of the questions that I had too, that said, but right now there are so many glaring doubts and holes in that story that it just takes common sense to question this. I'm genuinely alarmed how conditioned so much of the U.S. population is to equate skepticism towards pronouncements of media corporation and cooperation with mental illness. He said, If you don't instantly accept Wolf Blitzer and Andrea Mitchell's claim, then you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. This is exactly how I feel when I look at this story. I'm going to wait for things to come out. But the entire media has officially declared this is a right-wing conspiracy theorist and they're dangerous to society because they say this. Oh, by the way, we have a I'm going to play this full compilation of people that, what they said during the Trump presidency and how that really flipped on its head today. At least here on this show, we are being consistent. Political violence on all sides is bad. That is not the case for a bunch of people. Glenn Greenwald continues, says it's so crucial to understand the dynamic of dominating journalism. Few journalists have I can't read this morning. It's Monday. Have career security. Imagine you're a young journalist at a big media corporation. You know, if you ask these questions, Twitter will explode and ruin your career. He's talking about the dynamics of journalism right now, and then he asks the question. He says, why aren't there any signs of forced entry into the Pelosi's home? I think this tweet was written before the glass picture. And again, I'm not questioning that picture of the glass being broken, but there are some interesting takes on where the glass would have shattered, forced entry. He asked this question: who was the third person that opened the door for the police? That is a very good question. Not a conspiracy question, but who is it? Who was also in the house? And if there was also somebody else in the house, why was Paul Pelosi the one supposedly defending somebody who broke into their home with a hammer in his underwear at 2:30 in the morning? The police statement, I think, says that. I think the officers said the door was open for them and both of them were holding a hammer. Again, we'll wait for this stuff to come out. Why was Pelosi holding a hammer and the attack only happened after the police arrived? Just defensible here. It's possible that he heard somebody in his house and went to go grab a hammer because they don't believe in guns for some reason, which is a big difference between myself and them. He says, where's the body cam / security footage? Great question. I don't know. And then he asked, why isn't the press asking these questions? Which is a good question. Somebody also tweeted the fact, well, we won't get into that. Maybe we'll talk about this more when the more information comes out. But this is there's some stuff about this actual particular guy and his past and whether or not, and quote unquote, he's a MAGA extremist. I don't actually know. I don't actually think so. Geez, yeah, there's a lot more that I think we're going to get into later on down the week. All that I'm trying to say here is this is the information that we actually have, and there's a lot of roads you can go down with that. But the idea that this is a clear-cut MAGA extremist all the way 100%, and that is a direct derivative of the way that MAGAs have been talking, is a pretty steep ledge to jump off of this immediately. We'll wait to see what happens, but I do want to get to all of this sort of stuff. So immediately after this happened, the left-wing media and everybody jumped to the conclusion of it was a MAGA extremist. Now, we still don't know enough. There's a bunch of people in the comment section saying that this guy was filming a documentary at January 6th. He was a big-time leftist person. He was a part of a nudist activism cult, which I don't really know anything about that. But there's a lot of people saying this, that, or the other thing about this guy. We don't know. I'll just say that. We don't know. But the claim is being made that people on the right, myself included, by the way, that's what I don't understand. I'm included in this advocating for violence. I think I've made it very clear all the times that I talk, every time I'm on this show, on the internet, don't attack anybody that you don't agree with. And it's also never good. If this ends up being some crazed online conspiracy person that broke into the home of the Pelosi's and bypassed all of the security for some, I don't know, he was able to do that, then it's bad. I will condemn it. I did condemn it. Political violence is bad on all sides. I can't believe I continually have to say that. But the reason I think I continually have to say that is because it's not consistent on the lefty side of the aisle. If you remember, a bunch of people said they were glad that Rand Paul got attacked. There were other people that didn't really condemn as much as possible the softball shooting of the Republicans' baseball practice, and there was even more lefties talked about the violence in the street when it came to all the BLM riots. Again, consistency is key here. I'm going to play this compilation of a bunch of lefties talking about violence, political violence, which is not good. I'm going to play probably the entire thing. It's like 2 minutes long, but it is fascinating how much is out there. Now, if there is a commentator that exists, I would like it to be seen or to be sent to me of some conservative on some news channel saying, I'm glad Paul Pelosi got hit with the hammer. I don't think it exists, and if it does, I would condemn that. But this is a bunch of lefties doing the exact thing that they're blaming other people for doing. Check this out. Also, if you haven't already, would really appreciate it if you click the little like button that's like right down here, especially if you're watching on Facebook. That really, really does help us out, get to as many people as humanly possible on this show. Also, the little share button really, really does help us out. Or commenting and engaging with whatever your thoughts are. We haven't really brought any comments on today because I feel like this is a big story and we have comments flying in. So I'm going to play this video. I'm going to try to maybe distill some comments to be able to get them on the screen here. But watch this. A bunch of lefties doing the exact thing that they blame quote-unquote conservatives for doing. It's fascinating.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick them.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
So a lot is being made about Kevin McCarthy, who will probably be the Speaker of the House when Republicans take back the House after the midterm. Sorry, we're having some ear issues here. Will probably be the Speaker of the House when Republicans take back the midterms. He made a comment/joke to a camera was a couple weeks ago, saying he's excited for Nancy to have him hand him the gavel, and it'll be hard not to hit her with it. There's a bunch of people, lefties out there, saying, well, that's inciting violence. And now that her husband has been attacked with the hammer, how does that make you feel, Kevin McCarthy? As if that verbiage has anything to do with this situation. But also, there's been a lot of claims, well, this conservative whatever talks this way, and that's what's inciting the violence. Okay, you just saw about 2 minutes of lefties saying the same exact thing that they're accusing conservatives of saying. I'm here to say, let's just all lower the rhetoric just a little bit. How about that? How about we stop talking so cruelly about people that we have political disagreements with on both sides of the aisle? Hey, let's not make jokes about hitting the speaker in the face with her gavel. And also, let's stop advocating for non-peaceful violence or protests and violent protests. That maybe people should be in the streets terrorizing small businesses. How about that? Seems like a relatively okay solution. If we were to go to the 30,000-foot view, and this is just my small little thoughts here, if people paid more attention, you wouldn't have populism running amok, which I understand the populist argument to an extent, but at the same time, people paid more attention and were more involved in especially their local politics, we wouldn't have the heated rhetoric like we do, and we wouldn't be in the position to be blaming other people for the atrocities of what's happening across the country on so many different levels. So there's that. How about we all take a chill pill and relax just a little bit? There's so many comments here. I honestly couldn't really get to most of them, but somebody had some interesting questions here. Who shows up anywhere in their underpants? According to, I think this was in the police report. There were both Paul Pelosi and this dude were in their underpants, which is weird. Kim says apparently neither of them believes in guns. True. Also, here's another thing, I don't know this. I'm just questioning. I'm just wondering if this guy broke into the glass with that window. Whose hammer was it that Paul Pelosi and this dude were both holding? Remember, the police said that when they opened the door, they were both holding the hammer. Whose hammer were they holding? Was it Paul Pelosi, who heard a noise in the night and woke up to check it out but grabbed a hammer because he doesn't believe in guns? Or was it the dude, and was that the hammer he used to break into the glass? In which case, how did he let the 83-year-old Paul Pelosi wrestle the hammer almost out of his hand? This doesn't make sense. Now again, I'm not going down the rabbit hole of this was Paul Pelosi's gay lover and they got into an argument at 2:30 in the morning and Paul had to call the police. I'm not going down that rabbit hole as of yet. I'm just wondering. It's just curious. And I'm probably going to get labeled a conspiracy theorist for asking that question, but that was Glenn Greenwald's whole thing in the Twitter thread that we just read. You can't, for some reason, ask questions that just make sense. If that was the dude's hammer, how did the 83-year-old guy wrestle it out of his hands? And who was the third person that opened the door? Anyways, all right, I'm not going to repeat myself with all these commentary here, because before we run out of time, I would like to get to this. There are so many other things that happened over the weekend. The stampede that happened in South Korea was terrible. Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. There's also a huge bridge that collapsed in India that killed like 140 people. That's a huge story. There's Kim Kardashian news, which is also just fascinating that I just said that on this show. Oh man, there's more Elon news. There's a bunch of stuff going on, but we're going to get to all that tomorrow because the Paul Pelosi thing, I think, is taking the cake when it comes to stuff that people should be talking about, and the narrative around, well, conservatives alone are the ones promoting violence. Okay, cool it with that. But I did want to watch this quick video. This is a video of Joe Biden showing up to vote in Delaware. And you'll notice something interesting. Well, it says so on the Chiron. You'll notice something interesting that the President of the United States has to do in order to vote in his home state of Delaware. Check this out.
Hi. How you doing? Thank you.
Her first vote.
Did everyone watch that? Did everyone see that? Let me pause this clip right here where the president gives his identification card to the polling person. This is a story that I will not let up on ever. The president of the United States a year and a half ago, and sound like a dead horse here, called the Georgia voting laws that mandated people required people to show their IDs when they voted, Jim Crow on steroids. Joe Biden said that showing your ID and needing to show your ID to vote in the state of Georgia was worse than Jim Crow, which I don't know if you remember Jim Crow, but it was terrible. Southern Democrats would beat black people for the simple sin of voting. It was awful. Nobody should ever have done that sort of thing. It was terrible. Joe Biden said that showing your ID was worse. Yet, here he is showing his ID in his own state of Delaware, who has more strict voting laws than the Georgia voting bill that he called Jim Crow on steroids. But he didn't say anything about that. Interesting. Fascinating. The President of the United States being a lying liar in that regard. If you haven't already, would really, really, really appreciate it. There's, again, I know people jump on and off this stream. Would really appreciate you clicking the little like button down here and the little share button that is over here, especially if you're watching on Facebook. Would really appreciate you doing so. Really, really helps us out in terms of keeping the algorithm rolling and making sure people can hear some sensible commentary, at least I think. So there's that. Yeah. Let us know in the comment section, too, what you think. I'll probably go through a lot of these comments today because I feel like our viewership is quite a bit up today, especially with this Pelosi thing. We'll get to more of it tomorrow. Anything that comes out over the next couple days, we will bring it to you, especially regarding Paul Pelosi and the alleged attack inside his house. Yeah, I don't know. This stuff is wild. Is there anything else that I think we wanted to get to today? That's all I have in the the show notes or the little screen that I can bring all my videos into. But there's a bunch of stuff in the show notes that happened over the weekend that I just can't get to. Oh, you know what? Actually, now that we're talking about Joe Biden, let me talk about this really quick. Do I? No, that's going to take too long. Never mind. You know what? Have a happy Halloween. Hopefully you and your family and your kids have a safe Halloween. Go trick-or-treating. Remember a couple years ago when Halloween was like, quote-unquote, canceled because of COVID and people had like these weird catapults that launched candy, which were actually kind of cool, honestly. The reasoning for it was stupid. But the launching the candy into kids, I imagine a lot of them liked that. But anyways, have a great Halloween. Go say hi to your neighbors, interact with the people that live around you. And I don't know, don't talk about politics because I maintain that the overwhelming majority of this country doesn't think that their neighbors are their enemies. A lot of people don't pay attention. And with that, I don't know. Talk about the World Series or why the Seahawks are the greatest team in the NFL. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms. Instagram. Oh, I could have talked about Instagram too. Instagram is like down and like people are fired up about it. But you can still go follow me on Instagram. Just type in JOBOB, able to follow me anywhere on the Jobob Show on Facebook. That the Chiron's wrong on Facebook. If you've been sticking around. We're also doing a bunch of, I don't know that we'll do it today, but we're doing a bunch of podcast stuff on my Facebook page that airs on Facebook page, but also YouTube and all of your podcast platforms. If you miss any second of this show, you can go listen to it on the podcast platforms that you agree with, but also, that you use. And then also Jobob Unlimited, which is the show that we do on Facebook most days. I don't know if we're going to do one today. We'll see. You can watch that on Facebook and pretty much find it anywhere. Just type in Jobob pretty much anywhere. You'll be able to find me. That's going to do it for us today. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. We will see you in the tomorrow next time. Same time, same place. Have a happy and safe Halloween. God bless America.